Hey everybody, this is Gregory Brown, and this is the second day of my video blogging experiment. What I'm trying to do is sort of collect my thoughts on Ruby Mendicant University in particular, and the idea of free education, or just a way to completely change the way that we're thinking about education and training in general. And right now, because I've got a lot of thoughts that are sort of rough around the edges, normally I write, but it would be too hard to do that. So for now, I'm doing these videos. I have no idea if they're going to be interesting or if they're just going to be sort of rants. But we'll see how it goes. This is the second day, and we still have some room for improvement, I guess. Two things. One, last time I used this timer to sort of keep track of 10 minutes of time. I'm not going to do that because even though it was fun, it scared the shit out of me when it rained yesterday. I can sort of, for people who didn't see that video, it makes this really loud noise, which I don't need to have a heart attack on screen. Another thing is, you'll probably hear it now. If you hear a really loud fan spinning up, that's my machine and probably not yours. Well, maybe it's yours too, but I'm going to probably try and get a proper camera, but for right now, this is what we'll have to deal with. It's sort of rough and uncut. All right, so getting to the point. Today, I sort of wanted to talk about why I think what we're doing at RMU is unique, and also what I think is sort of wrong with education in general. And really, it can boil down to a fairly simple thing, which is that we present these ideas, these principles. When we're talking about software development, we might be talking about object-oriented design principles, things you might find in Gang of Four or in refactoring. And we talk about this high-level software design, and we present it in this really sort of sterile sort of way, where it almost sounds like this is just the way of the world and this is how things must be. And it's clear that you would never do anything else. The only problem with that is, much like pretty much any other craft, these sort of things have been extracted from real-world situations that were far more messy than what these patterns that we found that emerge out of it. And this does a number of disservices to people who want to learn this sort of thing. Now, let me just say, I'm not saying that we shouldn't clean things up and present them in this sort of abstract, pure way. We should. But the problem is that we don't really have the bridge material from here's a list of all of the functions in a language to here's how you apply high-level abstracted designs to your code. There's really nothing in the middle, and it's sort of a I can think of examples in lots of different fields. It's sort of like we just bought this house, and it's an older house. It's from 1946, and I have always lived in apartments, so I've never really needed to do home repair. This place is in pretty good shape, but there's lots of little things and some bigger things that I've needed to work on, and by contrast, with me having no experience in this, my dad has done this all of his life. It's one of his main passions and hobbies, and that's what he likes to do. So when he comes, I watch him as he repairs some of the stuff in my house and trying to learn from him, and I can immediately see the difference between the sort of coarse and complex solution that I would have compared to the really, really simple things that he did. And when he does those things, it really seems like it's obvious, and I have the temptation to feel almost embarrassed that I wouldn't have thought of what he thought of. But then I sort of compare it to software development and how the designs, the high-level designs that I'm now capable of doing, seem obvious to me, even though when I first started out in this stuff, it was not at all obvious. Now, other examples of that are, I've got a friend that's a fantastic cook. He's done small catering for small parties and things like that, but it's just really his passion. And unlike me, where I can cook okay if I'm sitting in front of a recipe, or there's one or two things that I happen to find by accident are good. My friend Nick can literally just look at the ingredients that you have and then just come up with something on the spot. And we've really been in situations where there's just like almost nothing, and he's yet somehow managed to pull something out of it. Now, that sort of stuff would, on the surface, appear to be almost magic, except for that it's really not. It's not at all. And I don't know, I guess that should be obvious, but isn't, and even more so in software development. And I don't know, I think that might be mostly our fault for the way that we tend to teach this stuff. We teach it in recipe form, in the sense of all you need to do is this, and then you get something great. So we have a lot of tutorials that are in that sense. Or we tend to really forget that all of that context that got us to where we were in the first place is missing. But the result of this is fantastically surprising. I mean, it's really to the point where people who are learning this craft tend to favor moderate to heavy complexity so long as it's well explained and has clearly defined instructions on how to use it. A real example from our September session is that not one but several students literally suggested that they wanted to use active record for an assignment that didn't require persistence at all, simply because they didn't know how to associate two different Ruby objects. And at that point, it's amazing to me, because you're talking about a highly complex database object relational mapper, which has a number of incredibly useful purposes, but the least of which is probably associating objects. And people actually got to the point where they're not separating the concept from the implementation, and they're thinking that, okay, well, in active record, all I need to do is set up, if I want to do a one-to-many relationship, then my object that I want to collect, say a user has many comments, well, the comments have a user ID, and that points back to the user, and then I, in my user model, type has many comments, and in my comments model, I type belongs to user, and there I go, there's an association. That's how I bring two objects together. And I mean, we've got the database in the background, but really what we're trying to associate is a user record and a comments record. Now, it didn't occur to them that you could literally just make a user class, say we're talking in pure Ruby, give it a comments method and have it return an array that contained a bunch of comments objects. And that's how you do association in Ruby or most object-oriented languages. I mean, it's all you need is a method that returns references to other objects, and then you've associated the two objects. And if you need a back reference, then say you wanted comments to be able to get back to their user, then when you instantiate a comment, you could pass the user in. Now, this is blindingly obvious to someone who can understand the idea of associating structures at the conceptual level rather than the implementation level. But this sort of thing is just all prevalent. And I guess it's, I really think it's because of the way that we teach it. I think the way that we teach these things sort of implies that this is an actual thing rather than an implementation of a thing. And it's really, I think, one of the first steps in abstraction to pull that out, to say, a definition describes something, it isn't something in of itself. And I don't know, I'm not entirely sure how to solve this problem, except for that I know that it's there, and we're working hard on it. I think that showing things in a number of different contexts and making sure that people place a demand on themselves to truly understand the underlying concept rather than just working with the surface level functionality I think it makes a big difference. You know, that's where we're heading with this stuff, and you know, that's the point that I try to hammer home in every example that we do. Um, so another place that you see this happen all the time is in automated testing. I've literally had someone spend half a day and then not be able to complete an assignment because they're trying to get RSpec 2 set up. And it's sort of bewildering to me that it's something that would literally prevent someone from getting credit for something or something like that. They spent the time on that. Now, that isn't their fault. It's, I think, this culture that we've developed in which we sort of say that testing is literally inherently a rule and a way of life that you must follow, and that furthermore you must follow everything that the people who produce these testing frameworks say, and that's just absolutely ridiculous. I don't think that that's the message coming down from the top, but I think that somewhere along the way it gets polluted somewhat, and that's what ends up getting received by the people who are, for the most part, just trying to be responsible about the way that they develop things. But of course, you know, it's crazy to me to think that rather than just going back to an earlier version of RSpec or dropping down to test unit, which is built in Ruby, or even dropping down to a set of examples that you could just repeatedly run that are just plain old Ruby, that we've got this tie to a particular version of a particular framework that literally someone cares about enough to spend so much time on. You know, it actually wasn't just one student, that was several students. And this sort of emphasis is something that we need to fix. People are very tied up in the idea that these implementations are what matter. People are very tied up in that this particular methodology is what matters. And I think it's ridiculous. I think it's a shame that we've come to this. I think that it's a systematic failure of us as technical educators to set things up this way. And I think that at some point we have to say, look, it's not about the freaking tools that you use. The tools that you use are important because you want to be able to have the best tools to get your job done, but the real purpose of development is to produce meaningful and useful software that can be used to do something that creates value in the world. And we have to take the emphasis and place it there and then equip people with the tools and techniques to do that, rather than focusing on the ideologies and the tool sets that come out of that overall purpose rather than are that purpose itself. So it's another rant. I will hopefully, after a few days, let some of this stuff shake out and start talking about more nuts and bolts RMU stuff. But for now, this is how it's going to go. I'd be happy to hear comments or questions. And also, if you have any suggestions for what might be useful for me to talk about in these short videos, or long videos, I guess, you're welcome to send them in. All right, that's it for today. Thanks.